Coming up on Arirang News, data show the pandemic has worsened South Korea's income inequality, business and employment income rising slightly for the wealthiest people, but declining sharply for the bottom 20%. South Korea announces detailed plans to develop its eco-friendly car industry. The goal is to sell commercially close to 8 million units in the coming decade and achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And more than 600 new cases of COVID-19 reported in South Korea for a second straight day. And those don't yet fully reflect an expected rise in cases from the recent holiday. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has reported more than 600 cases of COVID-19 for the second day in a row, a sharp rise compared to last week. There are major clusters at hospitals and factories, and these figures don't yet reflect an expected rise in cases from last week's long holiday weekend. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
For the second day in a row, the number of new cases on Thursday was 621, with the number of local infections also the same at 590. The day before was the first time that new cases had surpassed 600 in over a month. Seoul and its surrounding areas accounted for 432 of Thursday's cases, many of them coming from hospitals and workplaces.
Recently, there have been clusters with more than 100 cases at a plastics factory in the city of Namyangju and a gas boiler factory in the city of Asan. Crowded and enclosed working environments, not wearing masks, and dormitory living conditions for foreigners seem to be the reasons behind the increased exposure.
The authorities are conducting mass testing at nearby workplaces to make sure the virus hasn't spread beyond the affected factories. With foreigners being infected, the authorities also will make more efforts to provide information in other languages.
If workplaces do not follow the virus prevention rules and that leads to a cluster, please consider all possible methods in response, such as demanding compensation.
The spike in new cases could be just the beginning of the rise in cases. Authorities believe the results of the mass movement during the holidays will start to appear in the numbers over the coming days. On top of this, the relaxation of virus prevention measures since Monday could potentially increase the spread of the virus. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
A new study suggests that the vaccine from Pfizer provides 2/3 less antibody protection against the coronavirus variant from South Africa. And the research says it's not clear if the shot will be effective against the mutation. The findings by researchers from Pfizer and its partner BioNTech were published Wednesday in the New England Journal of Medicine. They used samples of blood from people who'd taken the Pfizer vaccine. In actual human trials, however, the companies say there is no evidence that the South Africa variant reduces protection compared to the most common version of COVID-19. In other news, the U.S. Justice Department has charged 3 North Korean hackers in the attempted theft of $1.3 billion from banks and other businesses to fund the North Korean regime. Those charges expand on the case brought in 2018, adding 2 new defendants and more victims. The suspects are not in U.S. custody, though. Lee Sung-jae has more.
Federal prosecutors in the U.S. announced Wednesday that they have charged 3 North Korean computer programmers for a broad range of global hacks. This includes a destructive attack targeting Sony Pictures and an extortion scheme aimed at attempting to steal more than $1.3 billion from banks and other financial institutions. The latest charges also build off earlier charges from 2018.
The indictment we're announcing today builds on the charges in the 2018 complaint, which describes how members of the conspiracy were responsible for several highly destructive and well-known computer intrusions, including the cyber attack on Sony Pictures Entertainment right here in our community. Some of these intrusions occurred as recently as a few months ago, using newly identified strains of malware uncovered by the FBI as part of this investigation.
Prosecutors say all 3 are members of a North Korean military intelligence agency known as the Reconnaissance General Bureau, and said they carried out hacks on behalf of the regime with the goal of using stolen funds to benefit North Korea. However, none of the 3 hackers are in American custody, and won't be prosecuted in the U.S. Instead, the Justice Department finds value in the latest indictments as a message to hackers that they are not anonymous and can be identified. North Korean military hacking units are known by multiple names in the cybersecurity community, including Lazarus Group and APT-38. Prosecutors say the three hackers were at times stationed by the North Korean government in other countries, including China and Russia. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Data show the pandemic has widened the wealth gap in South Korea. Overall household income from employment in the fourth quarter of last year saw a slight increase, but that was concentrated in the higher income brackets, and there was a big decline in the bottom bracket. Bae-yeon-ji has the details.
South Korea's income inequality worsened in the fourth quarter of last year, in the country's third wave of COVID-19. According to Statistics Korea, average monthly employment income among households in the bottom 20% income bracket plummeted by 13% as people lost their jobs. But that of the upper 20% range went up by almost 2%, meaning the wealth gap got wider. Households saw a slight increase in average income, though, overall, thanks to government relief money, which made up for a decline in earnings from employment and business. Households brought in about $4,670 a month on average from October to December, up about 1.8% on year.
Household income earned through employment and business declined for the third consecutive quarter. This is mainly due to job losses and because of the hit taken by small businesses in the resurgence of COVID-19.
Employment income dropped by 0.5% and business income fell by 5.1%. But so-called transfer income, received from the government, not paid in exchange for work, spiked by more than 25%. The government, in its second round of relief payments, handed out up to 2 million won each, or around $1,800 to the self-employed and small business owners. Bae-yeon-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea has come up with detailed plans to foster the eco-friendly car sector, in line with its goal to become carbon neutral by 2050. The Energy Ministry is vowed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from cars by 24% and help companies sell 7.85 million eco-friendly cars commercially by 2030. Kim Jae-hee has the details.
South Korea is ramping up efforts for its goal of carbon neutrality, in line with the country's Green New Deal initiative. According to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Thursday, Korea was the largest producer of hydrogen-powered vehicles last year, with the most hydrogen cars on the road than in any other country. It was also the fourth largest exporter of electric vehicles. To further accelerate the transition to eco-friendly vehicles and to discuss ways to boost the green car sector over the next 5 years, Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun visited Hyundai Motor Group's Namyang R&D Center in Hwasong.
We will set this year as a starting point in the era of eco-friendly cars and speed up innovation in supply and demand so that local companies can establish themselves as the first movers in the global market.
According to the Industry Ministry, the government aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from cars by 24% by the year 2030 by commercializing 2.83 million units of eco-friendly vehicles by 2025 and 7.85 million units by 2030. From this year, all new vehicle purchases by public institutions have to be either hybrids, hydrogen-powered, or electric. The government also vows to expand the number of electric vehicle chargers to over 500,000 by 2025 and the number of hydrogen charging stations to 450 by 2025, mainly in the Greater Seoul area. The country will also increase exports of eco-friendly vehicles to 830,000 units per year by 2025, a threefold increase from 2020, and reduce eco-friendly vehicle prices by around $9,000 per unit by 2025 by locally producing component parts. The country's Environment Ministry on Thursday also pledged to have commercialized 300,000 units of hydrogen and electric cars in total by the end of this year. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, it's been a while. Hope you had a good holiday. Thank you for coming on.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, in the minutes from the latest meeting, officials at the Federal Reserve say the U.S. economy is far from where it needs to be, and they're going to stick with monetary easing. There are those, however, who say fears of rampant inflation are overblown. What do you make of the situation at the Fed?
In U.S., there is a ongoing expectation on higher inflation due to coronavirus vaccine distribution and higher raw material prices. But according to the minutes of January U.S. Fed policy meeting, U.S. Fed clearly refused the expectation on inflation pressure. And they say that the Fed would need to hold interest rates very low and continue bond purchase to help spur the economy's recovery. This consensus is unanimously agreed by U.S. Fed officials in January meeting. So U.S. zero interest rate and liquidity supply will be continued until actual inflation exceeds 2% level on annual basis.
So they're sticking to the 2% target. And now stocks in New York were mixed for a second session on Wednesday. Tech taking a hit, but the Dow at another new high. What's the story in the global markets?
There were different movements between Dow Jones and NASDAQ yesterday. Dow Jones increased by 0.3%, but NASDAQ decreased by 0.6% in a day. Steady yield increase in U.S. Treasury long-term bonds gave a negative impact on stock market, but U.S. consumption increase more than expected limited U.S. stock market decline. Actually, in January, U.S. retail sales increased by 5.3% on monthly basis, and industrial production, something like GDP, also increased by 0.9% in January.
And here in Korea, a dramatic session in the market today. The main indices wavering at first, then closing quite a bit lower on this rise in cases of COVID-19 and other factors. Tell us about the local markets.
Along with other Asian markets and European markets, domestic market dropped in a large scale today. Kospi had a negative 1.5% daily return, and Kosdaq also had a negative 1.3% daily return. Increasing number of coronavirus infections, over 600 per day, raised concern on another round of resurgence and social distancing. Foreign investors and domestic institutional investors' sale was the main factor to decrease the market.
Now, Professor, the price of Bitcoin is now well over $50,000 on $52,000. In fact, a market cap of $1 trillion. So now it's entered the realm of silver and gold and the big tech firms in terms of size. How do you see this latest Bitcoin rally, and what are its prospects as a haven asset?
I think it is too early to assess the acceptability of Bitcoin as a safe haven asset. First of all, Bitcoin price is too much volatile compared to other risky assets, such as stocks and exchange rates. It is true that more influential institutions are investing on Bitcoin, like BlackRock, Tesla, MasterCard, Visa Card, and Chinese central bank. But there is a question whether these institutions, along with others, begin to invest on Bitcoin in earnest in the near future.
There certainly is. We will have to watch that with great interest on our program. Professor Kim, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.